Let's throw it open. Anything you want to talk about today?
Yes, well, welcome back.
Yes, welcome. Definitely welcome.
We've been involving ourselves with excuse me, a couple of churches. One is in Rio Negro, and they've given us an opportunity to minister there. And so at the end of every service, we pray with the people. And also, in a couple of weeks, we're going up to do some teaching. Haven't quite landed on what we're going to teach on yet, but we have the opportunity to do that.
Mm.
And we've been meeting young people, much younger than us, in their 20s and early 30s, but they are so attracted to us and attaching themselves to us. This is sort of funny, but being able just to make a really nice atmosphere when we are around them. We were with 4 or 5 of them yesterday, and we all went out to lunch together. And it's almost like they're just so drawn to us, very, very respectful, and just hanging on every word that we say kind of thing. And is this interesting? And I'm like, okay, is this sort of the way it's going to be? We're going to be the elders in the group and just sort of leading the young people in a certain way.
Well, I guess you're putting out a frequency and that is connecting and drawing with people, and I think that's when we start to get things flowing through us and heaven flowing through us. Then that's what happens. You're going to get a connecting, and people start to resonate, and see where that goes. Be interesting to hear what happens.
Yeah, we met a young couple also from a different group, but from the UK, and he'd been in ministry with his family and father for all of his life. He's born in a Christian church. We didn't talk about denomination, but we had a wonderful time, about 2 hours, coffee yesterday morning with him, his wife, and one of the young babies. And we just spent such a great time. We're looking forward to getting back together again. And I'm sure that he's aware of you. We did ask if he knew of Mike. One of the interesting things was that they felt drawn to Colombia as well. So there we had that sort of commonality. And we shared about what happened, why, and how, that kind of thing. So many common things. That was quick 2 hours.
Which is good. I mean, I do feel that the way heaven is aligning with earth, there are movements that taking places that God is aligning people around the world in different physical locations as well as the spiritual to being placed for the changes and things that are going to take place. So there's a lot of movements, both in the spiritual realm in terms of the angelic movements, but also in the physical realm. A number of people are sort of, I think, God is beginning to stir their hearts to move. So I think you're no doubt part of that. So, and if you connect with others who are drawn to move, then I think you can see God's got a purpose in that. So,
yeah, he did speak about movement. This is a movement, and not only for Colombia, but for all of the Middle or Central and South Americas. So I'm excited. We're excited.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of sort of legislating for the ordinances of heaven to be outworked. When the precepts, statutes, and laws of God begin to come into agreement, you've got government, then it opens a window, and that window is for things to move, to shift, to change. And those that are in alignment with the heart of God will find that movement begins to take place, and that's, for a lot of people, that's a challenge, obviously. But you've got to be sometimes, what you can do is not dependent on location, and other times it is, and you need to be in the right place. And it's important to be in the place that God wants you in, because that's where the blessings and the open heaven's going to be for people. If they're in the wrong place, then they're struggling under a closed heaven. It's like Jacob and Bethel, and unfortunately he made some decisions based on expediency rather than obedience, and ended up leading his whole family into bondage for hundreds of years. So being in the right place is an important thing for some people. Obviously, for some, it doesn't really matter where you are. You can do what you're doing. But for some, I think positions are really important. And I think in this time, particularly within what is going on governmentally, within the realms of heaven, things are being put into alignment and agreement. And that includes relationships and connections and different things like that. So, yeah.
Well, tell us about what's going on there. I know we missed you for a while, and
yeah. Well, I'd sort of been in Canada, in Winnipeg. Had a really good time there with a group. We did a sort of in a Christian retreat center, and it was great spending 3 or 4 days actually with people and eating together and fellowshipping, as well as the teaching. So that was good. Some really good activations there, some very good testimonies that came through from some of the activations, which was really great. And then basically went down to Seattle there and did a conference with Dr. O, which was good. Yeah, it was good because he did the first 2 days, then I did the last 2 days. I find it quite difficult when you break the flow of what you're doing by having to sort of swap sessions. So it was well worked out, and it was good fun spending some time with him. Some interesting things that he shared. And we've just actually I came back straight to do an intensive conference on living in dual realms, which was good. And then we've just had Carrie Browning, who's from Coeur d'Alene in Idaho, to do a healing, releasing toxic emotions seminar. So she did that last weekend, and she's been training people here for the last week, doing sessions with people in terms of releasing emotions and healing alternatively, and using oils and different things, which was very good. We had a really good weekend with that. Really, she's a really good, nice lady, and has a history with coming through the whole prophetic movement. Really, she knows everybody, and she's ministered with Paul Cain and Bob Jones, and everyone you can think of she's had an engagement with. So, but God has moved her towards actually bringing healing to people in a way which is really releasing sort of much more of a deeper level of ministry into people's lives, and equipping others to do the same. So we've got a few people here who are doing the training, and there's more going to be starting. So that's really great. We had a very positive testimonies with that, which was, we live streamed it, so that's available online. And yeah, we did the intensive with video and audio, and so that's available as well if you missed it. Which was good. It was a good time. There was some interesting questions and some interesting things which came out of it. Some good activations. So yeah, all very positive. So yeah, the last couple of months have been really fairly full on, which is all good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Going over the lesson on the 7 spirits, and just noticing that in my dreams, all the time, I have the colors purple and yellow in my dreams. Something's always standing out that is purple or that is yellow. A lot of times they're flowers for some reason, and they'll be together, just a bunch of purple flowers and a bunch of yellow flowers. One time I went to the dream where my shirt was turning colors.
Yeah.
And it was turning purple and yellow, and And then when I was going over the seven spirits, I was looking at spirit of understanding and spirit of the fear of the Lord. So I'm in the process of praying and to really try to figure out what's trying to be said to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find, there are all sorts of different ways of engaging the seven spirits of God, and particular ones within that. Jesus introduced me to them to start with, but I've found that some people sign up for courses and sort of engage them for teaching and training. I just found that they just seem to be involved in the background of my life, and I think are involved in helping connect and bring revelation and unveiling of things. When you're sort of in cooperation with them, they're there, and sometimes you sense them, and sometimes occasionally, one of them has turned up to do something or show me something. But I do think they are involved with all the sons of God, trying to bring them into maturity and bring them to a place of identity and position in authority within the realms of heaven. And sometimes, they have specific mandates from God. That's why sometimes we're more aware of their presence or more aware of something they're doing in our lives, because God's assigned them to us for a particular time or season or particular thing He wants them to do. Spirit of fear of the Lord engaged me with my scroll. First time I'd ever really engaged my scroll, and took me and showed me the judgment seat, and took me and showed me the garden of God, and was very instrumental in that. But the Father just introduced me and say, "Hey, do you want to engage and see a scroll?" And sort of like, well, okay, but not that I saw the whole thing, but it was a sense of getting it engaged with the fire, and so that was always really key. But I found that the seven spirits also work in benches within the seven spirits with each other. So wisdom, knowledge, and understanding work together, and then that opens the door for counsel. And they work indifferently. And when I've looked to engage them with all the sort of the circle of the deep and the chancellor's houses and that type of thing, then they seem to work together in a way that always opens up an opportunity. And sometimes you might have the spirit of the Lord and the spirit of the fear of the Lord, and work together in agreement, and then that connects with opening up one of the others to work together. So there's a very strong, seems to me, cooperation and unity that functions. That sometimes they work together on a particular season for us, and you find in that season something really shifts. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in the realms of heaven than most people are aware of. Okay. And yes. God has invested a lot in us, yes, as His sons, and He's waiting for, and creation is waiting for that investment to start to produce the dividend, which is essentially us coming into the revelation of our sonship and functioning in sonship to answer creation's groan and to bring our freedom to creation, to bring creation free. And creation is never going to be set free in fullness unless we are. So there's a lot of activity going on. As I learned to understand how what was and what is and what will be begin to connect, and how things, when you begin to connect with God's precepts and His statutes and His laws, and it's like putting together cogwheels that one rotates, and then when another one interacts, that rotates, and then that turns another one. A lot of that is going on to bring us into the right place, the right season, revelation, understanding. And we have an angel that's assigned to us in the realms of heaven, which is has been assigned for our position in heaven, and it's associated with our mountain throne. And that angel has been, it's one of the Malachim angels, one of the kings, and that angel has been at work organizing things and aligning things in our life until we've been able to take our place. And then we need to learn how to align things for our life in that way from the heart of God. But there's a lot of activity that's been going on. Obviously, our guardian angels are involved in that activity because they're all ministering spirits on behalf of those who are heirs of salvation, and they want us to come into the fullness of our inheritance. So I found quite interestingly, looking back over my life, I've just finished this book, which is at the publishers now, so it should be out in a couple of months. And having just reviewed various things and milestones and things that God has done, you see how things were arranged, and you see how things opened up. And because I remember God saying something, and I'm like, really? How's that going to happen? But then when you step back and you see it in hindsight, then you can start to see how something happened over here, then was inspired here, and then that opened this, and then all of a sudden something opens up that you never knew was going to be possible, because a lot of that is being operating behind the scenes. They're the blessings that are the empowerments within the heavenly realms for us to receive and then see them out working, And I think there's a lot more that as we grow into maturity, we get to be involved in that. And we can begin to align things, because as we mature, and like the sons of Issachar know the times and the seasons, we begin to know what to do. And that's actually what to do in our own lives, and to bring about when God says something. Some people just sit back and wait, hoping that it will work out, and sometimes God's grace and mercy is, but he's wanting us to mature. So he's withdrawing some of the support systems that we may have had to enable us to come into a place where he's going to push us out the nest, if you like, and we've got to fly. But it's all part of that process with the engaging the angelic realm, and with the seven spirits of God, and with the men in white linen, and all the interactions. When I first met, the first man in white linen I ever met, which was Jacob, had a significant impact on my life, just because he got me to engage with some revelation of his life, and then that connected to a lot more opened up as a result of that. And then I began to understand open heaven and being a gateway of heaven, and pursued that. And it really created a desire in my heart. And I think there's so much going on like that we can be involved with proactively as well, seeking, for the engagements that we need to move us and shift us into the right place at the right time, and know what to do in the realms of heaven. So I'm sort of aware that there seems to be a sort of a momentum of that going on, and more people are responding, and more people are beginning to function in the position that their identity releases, and then you start to see more things happening on the earth as it is in heaven.
All right.
Yeah.
Next one. One of the things that was mentioned to us in our initial meeting with the couple from the UK was that they've had a lot of training, cognitive kinds of training about God, and knew him in their minds, and was very sold on what salvation is and how it's obtained, and the role that Jesus plays in that. However, there was no feeling in their heart. There was no heart motive. And I said, well, I've never felt a downtime in my connection with God to my mind, but I'm concerned that I don't feel him here. And that was sort of that was a statement that he made several times. So we shared about encountering Jesus, the role that plays in the movement in the heart. And how we're changed because of it. So.
Yeah. And it is so important because it is relational. You know, when people sort of talk about, well, I have this mental agreement, an intellectual thing, it's not really very relational, is it? You know, if you don't have, you can't really have a relationship without emotions, not one that's going to really be beneficial. So I think, God has for a long time. I mean, when you go even back to the prophecy of Bob Jones in 1983, 4, or whatever it was, and it was like, yeah, we're going to have the wine poured out, and that whole thing was about restoring the Father's heart and restoring intimacy and restoring things back into a more experiential way of engaging God. And up before that, there was a lot of teaching, and a whole lot of really good teaching, but it didn't activate and trigger the emotions and the experience like God really wanted to do. And then you had a lot of people talking about angels and things like that. Whereas before, it was a very, very, very sort of few and far between that people talked about the angelic realm or angels or engaging angels. But now it's commonplace because actually we are beginning to engage with those things. So yeah, I think it's an important thing to have encounters. I was taught, and in the evangelical whole thing was, faith, blind faith, or believe it. Well, I don't see that in the Bible. I don't see that with God. It isn't, well, just believe it. He turned up. Jesus didn't just say to the disciples, well, I'm going to the cross and I'm coming back, and then I'm going to be with you again, and then didn't turn up. He wasn't like, oh, well, you just have to believe I'm with you. He was with them, and then the Holy Spirit then, took that on, that he was continuing to be with them. But it wasn't that it was a theoretical thing that they just had to believe. They experienced it. Well, why would God want us not to experience the same level of engagement that he gave them? And yes, Jesus probably isn't physically going to turn up necessarily in an upper room with us, but spiritually, he's calling us into the same level of experience. My experience with God is no different than if he was there physically in the room. It's just as real. It's just as dynamic. I just have as many conversations as if he was sitting there actually in a physical body. I'm just hearing him in the spirit. It's just as real. But it is absolutely vital that we move away from theoretical Christianity into an experiential relationship. And I wouldn't even want to call myself a Christian, to be honest, with the connotation of what that means for a lot of people. Sure. Because it's like, if people ask now, I would say, well, what do you mean by that? Because if you mean what I think you mean, then no, I'm not a Christian. But am I a follower of Jesus in a love relationship? Absolutely. But I'm not going to put my name to being part of a religion, because that's what Christianity has become. It's a religion rather than the focus on relationship. And I think in the kingdom, relationship is the absolute a vital ingredient that's been missing for so long with people. Yeah. Sometimes they have experiences, but experiences are not the same as relationship. I had massive experiences in 1993, 94, 5, all sorts of manifestations of glory and, laughter and being stuck to the floor and all sorts of things. But that's not relationship. It may have inspired me to pursue something, but it wasn't it. And some people get stuck with the means and not the end that means was supposed to. So they get stuck with the signs rather than who the signs are pointing to, or the wonders rather than that unveiling the wondrous nature of God and the causing them to pursue a relationship. So people get stuck with a lesser than type of a relationship that God wants. And I think most religious experiences are designed to bring people into a relationship, and then they realize that religion is not what it's about. that it is about relationship, and that relationship is real. And the reality of that relationship is what really makes the difference in our lives, not adhering to a set of rules or a structure, or going along with the status quo of the movement we're in or the denomination we're in, and having the liturgy that we have. Relationship is not liturgical. You can't formularize it, because it's real. God may want to do something different today than he did yesterday. Yeah. And if I have no expectation that he can, then I'm going to be stuck in yesterday all the time. Yeah. So those experiences, which were wonderful, and I'm not knocking the experiences, because God used the experience to really stir me to believe that there's something more, but they led to relationship. Yeah. I'm not looking for laughter just to give me an experience, because I'm full of joy in relationship. The laughter was an indication that, hey, there's more to be had in joy, but you're going to find that in relationship, not more meetings that you can go to and laugh, which is what people get stuck with. People get stuck with looking for the same things. They go for, because there's, I don't know, gemstones coming out of heaven or something. And they're like, wow. But then people start going because they want a gemstone rather than, well, who's giving those gemstones? It's the same as being caught up with the gifts and not actually having a relationship with the giver. Right. And it's a key. It's a key to have relationship. And you find it so much. People get stuck in the experiences and don't move into the relationship. They just want more and more experiences. And that's not the point. The point isn't more experiences, but actually a deeper relationship. And that, of course, will lead to more experiences, but not necessarily in the same vein. And yes. There are still people, wanting a repeat of Azusa Street or Toronto or whatever it might be. They're looking for a repeat rather than what we need in our generation for our day, which, to me is going to be a manifestation of our sonship, which needs a relationship with our dad. How can we ever be sons without a real depth of relationship with the Father? Like Jesus had. Yes. That's what he was able to do everything he did in relationship with the Father, and not outside of it. So, yeah.
Now, isn't that what changes you? And I'm thinking of DNA structures and who you are essentially.
Yeah, because what we behold, we become like. And it's transformatory to look into the face of God and to see reflected back who he sees us to be. Then that changes us, transforms us into that image. How do I know who I'm supposed to be without my Creator revealing it to me in relationship? I'm always going to be searching for something if I don't find it in the source, which is where his heart desired me, and his thoughts created me, and his words birthed me into being, and when I reconnect with that, all the vast sum of his thoughts and who he called me to be before the foundation of the world, and all that becomes unveiled, that brings a revelation through that relationship of my identity and my position in the realms of heaven, and then the authority that is going to be released from that. So, totally, absolutely key, that we don't miss out on the relationship because of the experience, because the experience is supposed to lead to the relationship, not stop us getting there. Well, you got anything you want to share, Mary? Oh, you're muted. Hang on. Oh, it's unmuted. Oh. Can't hear you, actually. No, there's no sound, which must be on your end, because I can hear. maybe your mic is turned off or not plugged in right.
Yeah, if she's using her cell phone, there are two places where you can turn the volume up.
So I think it's her computer, but it may well be because you've got your headphones things with a thing there rather than a mic from the computer, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Well, it's clear that when we speak to people,
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, it's clear that when we speak to people, they're more concerned about genuine relationships and what that means to them personally. And that was something that was articulated, I think, all day, both with our friend from the UK and the young people we met with the rest of the day. So people are really concerned about genuine relationships.
Yeah.
I think that what we represented in the whole conversation was these were younger people who had had some church experience and were not satisfied with it or were hurt by it. And we were representatives from that era, you know, the more traditional older church era. And they were very pleasantly surprised at our ability to relate to them, to receive them, to just talk with them with no judgment and that sort of thing. And I think that's why they were so just drawn to us, because their previous experiences with persons our age and above, you know, has been not so good with church relationships.
Yeah. One of the young men said that his mother would come home crying from church. Right.
Because the older ladies there had treated her so badly. She had a child out of wedlock. It's just like it was something they were never going to let her get past or something, you know.
Yeah, I mean, so much of, you know, what we were seeing in the whole religious setup was judgment and conformity to values which were not necessarily godly values, but were traditional values of church, you know. And some of that we need the heart of God in it, you know. Otherwise it does become a traditional value system that people are forced to try and embrace, particularly younger people, rather than the relationship. And you know, you can't conform someone through the law to stop them. You know, the law will never work. You know, it will just produce more problems if you put law and legalism onto people, because there's no relationship in that. You know, why do I want to, you know, in my relationship with God, why would I want to do anything that harmed that relationship? Because it's a love relationship. You know, I'm not bound by the law. You know, I had a conversation with someone a while ago, and they said, well, if there's no consequences to behavior, then, well, what does it matter what we do? I said, well, there may not be any consequences from one perspective, but there's certainly consequences from other perspectives. You know, if you go out there and kill someone, there are going to be consequences. You know, God might still love you, but the world won't, you know, and those who are going to capture you and put you in prison, they won't love you either. It doesn't change God's view of you, but it certainly will change the effect of your freedom to operate in the world. You know, so a lot of things are, you know, there are consequences to behavior, but if you're only not doing things because out of fear of being punished by God, then that's not relational at all. That's seeing God like the guy who buried his talents saw God. You know, you're someone to be feared, you know, and it's like you're this, and well, who told him that? Not God, because God didn't like that, you know. So I think, you know, we need to have a personal experience of who God really is and how love really functions.
Yes.
Because love is what should motivate us.
Yeah.
You know, not fear. Perfect love casts out fear. So all the law-based religion that I was brought up with, you know, and all the fear of that and the wrong view of God, You know, it's that totally changes when you begin to meet him face to face, and you know his love, and you experience his love, and you live in his love. Then you don't need the law to get you to toe the line. You know, there is no line. You just don't. You just want a relationship. You wouldn't want to do anything that's going to hinder that relationship. But so much of the young generation are put under the laws of the older generation.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember the whole thing with Bethel when they were saying, okay, yeah, you know, the next generation, our ceiling is going to be their floor and we're going to pass and, you know, and then it all starts to sort of get tied in. It's like, oh, well, we're going to set the biblical parameters for what that is going to be. Well, all of a sudden they're now restricting what God can do, because he's only going to operate within the biblical parameters that they set. And that's never gonna produce freedom. When you set the biblical parameters for the next generation, all you're doing is actually tying them to the previous generation, but not in a relational way, but in a controlling way. Yeah. And in a way, you can't be part of us unless you agree with what we agree with. Yeah. And unfortunately, you have that all over the Christian community. The unity, supposed unity, is based on agreement, not relationship. See, I can have a relationship with people I totally disagree with, because my views and their views should not stop us relating, because we're all brothers and sisters in relationship with Jesus. So why should someone's different view actually stop me relating to them? But that's what happens. You know, I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday who had a really tough time in the US when he went to speak at a conference in a very well-known setting and was totally humiliated because the head of that organization denounced them from the stage because they didn't fit in with their eschatology and their this and that and the other. And they invited them there to do a conference. They did 3 sessions and then they were basically told they couldn't do any more. And not only that, they were denounced from the stage publicly by a very public figure, which in itself was just terrible. Sure. But the reality is, some people, if you don't agree with them, then you're deceived. And this is what they said: you're grossly deceived, you know, because you don't agree with our eschatology. No. I mean, it's just like, come on. But this is what's out there. And my personal view is that this was an opportunity for that whole grouping, and it's a really well-known grouping, to embrace something new, and they rejected the something new. And you'll find that those who saw that and are being drawn by the sound of heaven, they'll leave that whole movement. They'll leave that group. They'll have to step out from it, because they now realize that group is not going to accept what God is doing, just like the Moses generation didn't accept to go into the promised land. God is giving groupings opportunities, and when they turn them down, people are going to leave. And interestingly, this friend was saying that on the same day that they got renounced, a whole missionary grouping of that organization left the organization. You know, because, hey, God is not going to allow people to stay under those wrong coverings when those coverings are restricting them coming into the fullness of their inheritance. He's going to call them out, and is calling them out. Sure. You know, Arthur Burke's whole seminars on life after church was because so many people are being called out of church, and they're all waiting out there for the reality and the genuine to be expressed that they can be participating with. You know, but we need to actually start modeling that genuine and calling them to come into true fellowship and relationship, not based on laws and regulation, but on the fellowship we have of both being in Christ and having relationship with him. Because that's really what's going to change things. And the old guard may have to die in the wilderness if they're not willing to cross over. And if they're starting to hinder people crossing over, then they may end up dying a lot earlier. Yeah, because it's like there's a danger in opposing what God's doing. Not that God wants to kill them, but there are consequences when you step outside of walking with him. So I was, really sad. I'm saddened by that whole thing because it was like, because I thought, here's an opportunity, and that opportunity was spurned and rejected. And even to do something like, I mean, I guess it's like, when Bill Johnson denounced Jason Westerfield publicly from the stage.
All right.
Jason Westerfield wasn't there. These guys were actually there, publicly being humiliated by this world-renowned leader from the stage. I mean, that's harsh. I mean, I think that's really harsh. But it's what happened. Now obviously you have to get over it, and you have to bless, forgive, release people, and move on and learn from the experience. But it's sad that person representing that whole movement has now effectively said, we don't want what God's doing.
That was the announcement.
Dangerous thing to do.
Sure it is. Yeah. We haven't discovered what love looks like, and it doesn't look like that.
No, it doesn't. No, not in the slightest. It definitely doesn't look like that. Because even if I did disagree with somebody, I wouldn't want to publicly humiliate them.
Never.
It's just like, what purpose does that serve other than elevating your position over them? It doesn't do anything to help what God is doing in these days. It's a sad thing when that happens. But I think those that have led people up to the promised land and are now stopping them crossing over, there's a real danger on that. That they've been, some of them movements, the head of the spear, as they like to call it, and now they're not wanting to plunge into what it is, and they're sort of holding back. And God's calling people to cross over.
Hey, I think ego is such a dangerous thing when we get to a point that we think that the people that we sort of introduced or trained up can never go beyond us, or that God cannot show them something that He has not shown us. I think that's the problem.
And I love it when people have experiences that I've never had, because all it does is open up another opportunity. You think, wow, great. Here's somewhere else is available to go, rather than, oh, no, I don't want to, And a lot of people have more knowledge than they're willing to release.
Sure.
Because knowledge is power. And as soon as you release knowledge, everyone has the same knowledge as you do. You're no longer in the same powerful position that you were. Right. But that's what Jesus did. He released the revelation of the Father's heart. He revealed the Father. He didn't say, oh, no, I'm keeping the Father to myself. He totally expressed the heart of the Father to his disciples, showed them what to do, taught them how to do it, released them to do it, rejoiced when they came back, having testimony of what they did. That's true discipleship. True discipleship is walking alongside somebody. It's not being over them to stop them going beyond because Jesus didn't say, well, you can do some of the things I did, but I'm not letting you do all of them, because then I'll lose my sort of special position. He said, no, you can do all the things I did, and more than that, you can do greater things than I did. Which is just like, well, how's that for what should be the example today of how we disciple people and encourage people to go further? I don't want to pass the baton to anyone, but I do want to walk with people who are going to take that baton further with me, and I can follow them.
Sure. That's right. Good.
But that attitude is not always prevalent when it comes to positions, when people have got a position and a reputation that they don't want to let go of, and they want to keep people under them.
Yeah.
Which is the mediatorial covenant, old covenant system of how it worked, and God has left that system. He's really not empowering that system anymore, which means that people need to discern where they should be. People really need to be discerning where should I be? If I'm under someone's covering, well, then I'm submitted myself to that covering. And if they're restricting, then I'm going to be restricted to a degree. You can still have personal encounters with God, but you're never going to be fully free if you're under someone else's covering other than God's. So we're in that place where God is calling more and more people to recognize that they have the freedom to come into a personal relationship with him beyond the veil into the realms of heaven, face to face, without having to go through anybody else. Yeah. Now, of course, that puts people into a disadvantage. What? Your congregation can hear more than you can? Yeah, I hope so. Why not? No, why not? Because they need to hear for their own lives first start, because I'm not going to tell them what they should be doing. Sure, so if they can't hear God about their own lives, well, they're going to be drifting around. And actually, why shouldn't they hear things corporately? It doesn't have to come through one or two people. God can speak through anybody, and we need to be open to hear when he does. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you got anything going there yet, Mary, on sound? At the moment, you're mute. There you go. But
do I have sound now?
You do.
Oh, okay.
How blessed
I don't know what it was, but it's back.
How blessed we are now to hear your voice, as well as just looking at our face.
Well, we've just come back from doing a lot of traveling. We were up in Boston and Philadelphia, and we did drive through Tennessee and kept going on the way up and on the way back, other than stopping for coffee. So there was no, and we saw our friends from Tennessee Saturday, and they said, you still haven't gotten the handwriting on the wall. And we said, no handwriting on the wall. But she was very encouraged that you thought that we should move to Tennessee. She thought that was a really good sign. And I'm like, forget it. And then I don't know if you remember a while back, I was telling you about our friend that had the manifestation of the people walking down the driveway, and she tried to pick up the phone. And well, they are here now visiting.
Awesome.
We were with them last night, and we will be with them today and tomorrow. So that's really sort of neat that we're going to get to see them. But what I'm really having a hard time with is, okay, it has now been 8 months since we have essentially had everything stop, all methods of fellowship stop. And I'm really having a hard time with that. I really feel at times that I am drifting. Okay. And I'm like, what do I do? And just having a really hard time. It's like, you'll sit there and talk about, the things that you have and the things that you see, and I go, I ain't getting none of that. I don't see none of that. I'm not... and I don't want to get all wrapped up in the experience. I'm saying, Lord, what is it that I've just seemed to hit this brick wall that is going nowhere? And yet I do remember listening to Patricia King talking about where she went through about a year's period of time where everything shut down. And the Lord said, and people would say, oh, did you feel that? And be like, no, didn't feel it. Oh, did you see this? No, didn't see it. And for her, she said it was where the Lord got her to the point of where you just have to believe. And even when you don't see and you don't feel, you just keep going. And so she said it was very, very hard going through it. But once she went through it, she was to the point of like, well, if I see, fine. If I hear, fine. If I don't, that doesn't matter. I know that we're still moving forward, that God is real. And I'm like, and I've never been really super on the side of where I see a whole lot and feel a whole lot and have that type of engaging. So I'm like, Lord, what's going on here? Because it's really getting to be very difficult right now in terms of, okay, do I sit here and wait for something and nothing happens? And I just feel like that's all I'm doing. But I have to say, okay, Lord, I know you're with me. It doesn't... On that respect, I know I'm not alone. I know you're here with me. But where is the blockage on my end that things seem to be at a complete standstill? Because I want to get that out of the way. So so in your infinite wisdom, please, anything you can share. It's hard.
Yeah, I know it's hard. I mean, but all of us have to go through that dark cloud experience, and it's different for everybody. But it brings you to the point of real surrender, and then God's able to use you in a way that He didn't before. And also it's sort of, what is the mandate that God gave you when you came out? Was it just to come out and wait, or was it to come out and seek for something else? Or, because having a mandate for what it is God's saying, that's what you can say, okay, God, you said to do this. So, I'm holding to the fact that you told me to do this. Therefore, I'm willing to go through it because you said, but it may be that, there's going to come a point where, you may have to say, God will give you a mandate to do something, then you got to be willing then to say, okay, well, fellowship, well, we're not having any fellowship with all these guys we were, but hey, what if God brings us into a whole new different situation where we start to draw people to fellowship and then start to meet together with people and start to begin to lay a foundation of something different and something new? Because ultimately, God does not bring people out of fellowship with people so that they are not going to enter into something different and something new. But some people may have to start that different and new. Some people may join someone else who's doing something different and new, but some people have to start it. And it's like, there's a mixture of things that could be going on. And obviously there's two of you. So, that may be slightly different for each of you, maybe having a different experience of that. Yeah. My dark cloud experience was definitely I'm not letting you see anything, hear anything, engage anything until you surrender, and really surrender, not just go through the motions of surrendering. Now I was able to do that still in relationship with people, but no one knew what was going on. It was a very deeply personal experience. But once that was dealt with, all of a sudden, I could see and engage in way more than I could ever do before. Because now God could trust me in a way He couldn't trust me before, and it's like, sounds like Patricia King's experience was very similar to that. It's like, well, it's not based on experiences, but I'm sure there was something in her that needed dealing with for that then to move her into the next season of her ministry life, whatever it might be. And I think it's the same thing with you guys. It's, is it the not being able to engaging with God or is it not being able to engage with other people in engaging with God? And there's probably a mixture, but sometimes God has to place you in that place of where you have to do this on your own. Because when you're in the midst of engaging with other people, there are things that happen and experiences that happen, and because you're in the midst with other people, and sometimes God has to say, no, you need to be, you need to get in the cave. It's like, it's like several people you see were alone when God really started to move with them, and like Elijah, it's like, oh, well, I'm the only one. And I'm like, oh, woe is me, I'm the only one. It's like, well, no, actually, there's a whole load of thousands of other ones, but, let's deal with you. So, and it's not easy. It definitely isn't easy. And it does feel sometimes like it's so hard and it's so heavy.
And I realized, too, that after being in church since the early 70s, and for most of that time, other than a short period of time when Joe was in grad school, having always been actively involved in a church, that this is now not being involved in anything is a whole new realm, and something that I never was ever looking to be in. And so I realized, and maybe this is part of what the Lord is unraveling, is that there was so much of my identity wrapped up in what you were doing.
Yep.
And so like a couple people have said to me, well, where's your writing going? And I said, well, being in school has stopped a lot of my writing because I just don't have the time. And I was talking to this friend of mine who is she's a publicist. And I said, and one of the things that I grapple with is like, does the world really need another book? There are so many out there. It's like, do they really need another one? And her point was like, well, but it's your viewpoint. It's what you're seeing. And so that's one of the things that I've grappled with in terms of writing. And also I've had a couple ideas, but I can't really say that I've gotten a real thing from the Lord saying, yeah, this is the one you should tackle. And I'm like, I don't want to go off and write something if that's not really got his impetus behind it. Just don't want to do that. And the other is for a novel, which is still really taking through the time of trying to work out the characters and the story for that, which it just it's taking me a lot longer than what I thought. But now is turning into a very, sometimes for me, very awkward, uncomfortable place of like, I guess I don't know where do I fit in, because right now I'm not fitting in anywhere. And after having been part of something for so long, for decades, I'm really feeling a little like, okay, God, what are we doing here? And he doesn't seem to be saying anything. He doesn't seem to answer that question. And when we were with our friends last night, they were talking about a situation with their granddaughter who had been praying about a job. And she was saying, I keep praying, but God doesn't answer. And Sandy said, this had to be the Holy Spirit because it wasn't me. And she said what came out of her mouth was that God's not answering you is your answer. And in this situation, that was exactly what it was, because she was asking about one thing and she wasn't getting a clear direction. And the other door that she really wanted opened up. And so he was saying, yeah, he's not answering you. That's you're answering, do I take this? And he's not responding. Well, there's your answer. If he's not saying, go do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
So it's just a very awkward time. And I don't know that Joe is going through this. He seems to be motoring right along at his steady pace. And I'm the one that's sort of like,
But because Joe probably wasn't quite operating in the same relational way you were with church.
Probably.
And therefore, may not have such things to be dealt with in terms of that. Because ultimately, I do not believe that God wants people to have life after church without finding life in an ecclesia, because that's really where this is going, into an expression of people gathered together in relationship, which is a totally different thing than church. And so sometimes you really have to really come to the end of that. The fact that you're still looking for it or feeling awkward about it is probably an indication that actually you're not free from it. Because God probably isn't going to bring you into a situation where either you're given a mandate to start an ecclesia or you're going to participate with others in an ecclesia until you've really got everything dealt with from your need for what church gave you.
Yeah.
And I would be proactively asking him that.
Yeah.
What else do you need to deal with in me that I was getting from church rather than getting from you, or in and ask, see what he says about that, because you may not just be asking the wrong question,
Yeah. Well, on the other side, it's like I was telling my friend, I said, when we first left in the very beginning of the year, those first couple weeks where we got up on a Sunday morning and we weren't going anywhere, I felt really like, what am I doing? My pattern has been broken. What am I doing with myself? And I told him, I said, it's now I get up on a Sunday morning and it doesn't bother me in the slightest that I'm not getting up and going somewhere. And I'm saying like, is this good in terms of where it's gotten to the point that in terms of, because there's no fellowship at all. And I'm like, okay, it's, I guess there is stuff in me that he is trying to get to, and I'm going to say, okay, what do you need to work here on, and let's get to it, whatever it may be, because I don't, this is just a really awkward time, and
but I guess it's like, why is it awkward? That's the question. Why are you feeling awkward having more time to spend with God and less time having to do anything else?
Except that I'm finding that even though I have more time, I'm struggling with, well, I want to do it because when I'm there, it doesn't appear that anything happens. And I feel like I'm just hitting this blank wall, and a few things will happen, and I'm like, but Lord, other people are having all these times where they're seeing, they're understanding, and I'm just here, and it's like nothing is happening.
Relationship.
But I would say, don't say nothing's happening.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is actually declaring and creating a prophetic expectation that nothing's happening, where God is always doing something.
Yeah.
But I don't understand what's happening is a totally different thing than nothing's happening.
Okay.
Because I'm guaranteed something's happening. God's at work.
Yeah.
God's at work. He's doing something. You may not understand what it is, but it's happening. And I'm careful that you sort of don't, with your own words, create a scenario that then becomes self-fulfilling, because you then feel even worse. But in reality, it's like God is doing something.
Yeah.
Just, like with me, 4 months of what on earth are you doing? I don't need to know what you're doing, but I know you are doing something. I'm just going to trust what you're doing, and I'm going to enjoy actually what you're doing, even if I don't even know what it is, rather than I'm going to feel, I feel awkward, I feel this isn't right. Something in you emotionally is creating those emotions. That's probably the thing to actually ask God to reveal. What is causing me to feel awkward? Where is that coming from? Is it still a guilt response to not being involved in something deep down, that I'm feeling awkward, but I don't recognize that as being what it is? What's being released? Because sometimes things have to be released to come to the surface for then you to identify. This is still that I still am going through the grief of, because you invest your life into something, and then God says, well, that's not really it. There is a grief thing in it. There's a sense of, well, did I waste all my time?
Exactly. What have I been doing all these years? And well, where did that get me? I mean, throw that out the window.
But there are real questions, I think, to ask in reality, but for God to bring an unveiling of, actually, he was using you all throughout that time, and he was using that journey to bring you to this point, from which now you can go forward. If you're able to now let it go, to move forward, and not try and bring something with it, or whatever the feelings are, whatever those feelings are that make you say, well, I feel awkward. It's okay. First surrendering them to, okay, I'm not going to let those feelings get the better of me in that sense, but also I'm going to use those feelings as a springboard for God to bring me into a new place. But it's not easy. Life after, this is why Arthur Church is doing this whole seminar thing, Life After Church, because it isn't easy for lots of people who know God has called them to come out of something, but have not yet found what it is that they're to be coming into, or be part of, or to establish. Because it may be that when you get to that point where you're not feeling awkward, God may say, well, now here's the mandate. Do this.
Okay. Now this would have been a couple of weeks ago. Of course, we haven't had a chance to meet, but there were 2 instances where I went back in time and ministered to 2 slave children.
Awesome.
A girl and then her little brother. And that was a very interesting dynamic, in terms of, first, they didn't even get freaked out the fact that I was there, which was really sort of like, okay. I mean, but it was just really interesting to go back, and they were going through a very difficult time. First it was the little girl, then later it was her brother, and just to encourage them to, you know, that this is not the end of life, and there is something better coming for you. Of course, I know the end of the story, and to say, do not give up hope, you know. And they both, in their own way, knew the Lord for, you know, however much of a relationship one could have back at that time, and to say, there is something much, much better coming in the future. You know, I can tell you that positively. Don't quit where you are now. Yes, it is a very bad situation that you're in. However, this is not the end of your life, and this is not how your life is going to end. There's something much, much better coming in the future.
Yeah.
And so that was really a very different thing to do, and a very humbling thing to do. And the fact that they were both able to receive it, it was just different.
Yeah. Well, you can't say nothing's happening when you've done that. So,
well, maybe it's more like I'll get these isolated incidences where something like that happens, and then it's like the long period of time and something happens again. And with Joe is constantly going all over the place and has been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
Now, but that's what basically, and I have to grapple with that. That is his mandate. It's not mine. Not that it doesn't happen, but I can't try to do what he does.
No.
Because that just doesn't work.
No, but you know, if God is opening that opportunity, you can certainly set the desire of your heart on that in a bigger way.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing activations with a lot of people recently to encourage them in the same thing, and some awesome testimonies of, you know, people rescue and often kids, often going back to minister to children, save, because children's cries obviously get to God's heart. You know, the cry of, because it's childlike faith, and so many. I had a lady friend of mine went back to the French Revolution, saved I think 4 children from a fire, and then rescued them and took them to a place. I mean, just and over and over again, it was testimonies of children and God doing this, sending them back to do this with children or do things with that. You know, so I think this is something that God is wanting to do, because we're becoming more available. And I think, you know, you can perhaps just remind God that you are available.
Yeah.
You know, say, hey, I mean, I do it all the time. Hey, I'm available. There's nothing much going on at this second. I'm available.
Yeah.
You know, and be open for that and pursue it. You know, seek God to use you in different ways than He's been using you in the past. You know, but see it as an ongoing process of God bringing you into something new. And you'll have, you know, I mean, some people will have never done anything like that ever in their lives. So it's quite a special thing that God has used you like that, you know, and, you know, I'm sure He'll use you more like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, encourage you just to keep seeking and pursuing, but don't put anything off limits, you know. That's the key, to get to the point where God, whatever it is you want me to do, whatever it is you want me to go, even Tennessee, I'm willing.
Oh, no. No, wipe that off the slate. Hey, if you told us to go to Tennessee, I would go.
Yes, I know you would.
I definitely would.
Yeah,
he hasn't said that yet.
No,
and in fact, the people whose house we were house sitting at, they had this little 3.5-pound dog, and that's who we were taking care of. The week that we came back, she sends me this text, really excited. She goes, Mary, there was a bear in the yard today. And I'm like, there was a bear in the yard? Oh, thank you that it wasn't there the week that I was there. I mean, I've got to go out there and walk this little dog, and I have to be concerned that there's going to be a bear that comes out of the woods. No, thank you.
Well, that bear is just drawn to the resonance that you left there.
No, I think it's drawn because it went something to eat. It went after their garbage can once, so I mean, it's looking for something to eat, and it's not going to be me. You know, I guess I really know that God's got something. It's just like, okay, can we get on with the program? And part of it too is I can be very, I want to say the word intellectual, but I can really, I don't know what the word is that I want to say. I'm pretty much, for the most part, I'm pretty much an introvert, and I can get into studying and reading and just become fascinated by stuff.
Yeah.
More so than always being relational. And so maybe the Lord's trying to say to me, he goes, you're really good at reading books about me, but now it's time to really know me. And I'm like, now wait a minute, I'm not real good at that.
Well,
how do we work through this?
I mean, ultimately, the word that comes to me really is rest, and coming to a place of rest, but you are content in that rest, irrespective of whether something's happening or something isn't happening, but you're still at a place of rest. And when you say you feel uncomfortable, you never rest when you're feeling uncomfortable. It's like when you're trying to sleep and there's something that isn't quite, and you're saying, I'm trying to find the right place to get myself comfortable to go to sleep. It's like that. And it's like rest is a place where you actually are able to be in that place wherever you are, whatever the situation, whatever the circumstances, but you still actually feel a place of rest. And I think that's where God is bringing you, to that place where you will know that you can be at rest, whether you're doing something, not doing something, but it's because it's not dependent. Rest is not dependent on activity or inactivity. It's an actual state of being that enables you to be in a relationship with God that places you in a place that you know that you're totally loved and accepted without having to do anything for it. And then everything can flow from that place. And maybe some of that's what maybe God maybe just bringing you to this place of rest.
That could be. And my friend Warren, who has the other young friend who's familiar with you and everybody else, that we all got together on that night. Warren is going to try to see if a couple of us can get together next week one evening. Because Warren said the same thing. I really feel like I need some Justin Abraham. That's sort of like when he says that, it means like, man, I got to get into this, and I really need more of like the heavenly encounter type thing, and so he was going to see if the young guy was available, if Alex was available, and if so, between Joe, myself, and Warren and Alex, and then maybe invite another couple over to see how they respond to, well, what do you think of this? So hopefully next week, if everybody's schedules all mesh, because we haven't been able to do it because all of us were traveling at different times. Now it seems like everybody's home, that we'll be able to get together again. So that would really be a good evening to have a chance to really fellowship again with other people where Warren is really open to it. Alex is actively engaging, to be able to have that camaraderie, as opposed to, because with our friends that are here, we're like, okay, now how do we tell them about where we're at right now? We've been broaching, they know a little bit about the whole thing, what happened when we left our church, and we talked about that last night. But to start broaching with them where we're at now, it's like, okay, how do we slowly start unpacking this? And will they get freaked out? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. We'll have to see, how the conversation goes, because it always comes back to the Lord, because that's really our real cement. We've all been, we were all in church, decades ago, all have done different things, but everything always comes back to about, the Lord, what's the Lord doing and all that. So we're like, okay, how do we gently broach with them and say, well, here's where we're at.
Well, he's doing something. We're not quite sure what it is.
It's different. It'll be an interesting conversation when that, because I'm sure it's going to come up and come around, and we'll see how they do with it. I don't think they'll be too freaked out, but it might be like, really? We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think Rest is the key to everything, and that comes out of relationship, knowing your love, and you know, God knows it all. He knows exactly where you are. He knows exactly how you're feeling. He knows exactly what's needed. And as you just keep walking with him and resting in that fact, that's the thing, is like, do I trust God in where I am right now? If I can say yes, and I rest in that trust, then God's going to work it out.
And I guess I do realize, like growing up, there was a real performance aspect that I grew up under, in terms of you got the good grades, and so I did things in order to please my parents. I mean, yeah, I really liked school, but there was an expectation, like, these are the things that you do, so then you perform to achieve those, and when you perform to achieve them, allegedly, then people accept you and they love you. Yeah. And I can see where there are aspects of that, of where I've transferred that over to God. Well, yeah, if I'm doing all this stuff, oh yeah, I must be right up there. I must be one of the favorite kids, because boy, I'm really in there plowing away and doing everything. And grappling with watching that unravel, and to say that really does need to go. But then when that goes, then what's next? And not really.
But rather than thinking what's next, just think who I will be. Who will I be, rather than what will I do?
Well, it's like, can it really be that God, that really isn't important to him? Because it's been so much a part of my life.
No, it's not important to him.
It's not.
Important. He's more interested in you being you than what you can do, because he can always get someone else to do it. So
but
he's more. Yeah, he values the relationship, and you're knowing who you are rather than what you can do.
Yeah, and being able to rest in it, and that's I'm realizing, like, okay, this is really okay, God. You're really all right with this, because it goes against the grain of a lot of what I've grown up in, and so it's new territory, and it's like, how do I flow in this whole new territory, because it's very, very different. Because I've never been here before.
Yeah, and I think that's part of even the fact you're sort of asking God the question, are you okay with this, is an indication that actually there's still something there that he needs to deal with, so that you are okay with it, that you're okay with it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, God's okay with it, but you're asking the question, is he? Because you don't feel okay with it. That's why you're asking the question. Yeah. It's just a reflection of how you're feeling, rather than how he's feeling, because he's very happy that you'll come to him and find rest.
Yeah.
And it isn't about the activity of doing anything. But it's a journey, and everyone's got to go through their own path to get there.
Yeah.
And I can smile because I've gone through my path, so I'm just smiling at you. Been there, got the hat and the t-shirt, and it was really worth it. It was.
I'm sure. I'm quite positive it's going to be. It's just that I guess it's like when all you talked about, when all the foundation gets knocked out from under you, and you're like, okay, I'm standing on nothing, because everything that I thought was the foundation, I've now found out, like, oops, no, it's not. Then it's like relearning all over again.
Yep. Oh yeah, totally.
And that's the awkward. I guess when I say I feel awkward, it's awkward and uncomfortable, because it's just all different, and it's different and new, and I'm not sure how to navigate in the different and new. I'm sure he's up there. I'm sure God is laughing at this whole thing and just having.
I'm sure he is. He was
cracking up.
And it's like, just surrender, give up quick, just give up. That's the only advice I can give people in this scenario. Just give up, surrender. Don't ask the questions. Don't even need to ask the question. When you don't need to ask the question, then you've surrendered.
Okay, so I was just going to ask you, so how do you know when you really have surrendered?
Because you feel different. You know it's different. Oh yeah, Joe. You do know you're different. You just know. All I can say is I totally felt completely different when this whole stuff got dealt with. And I knew, because I genuinely didn't need to know.
Okay.
And I knew I genuinely didn't need to know, and therefore God was then genuinely free to be able to do whatever he wanted, because it got to that point where I didn't need to know anymore. So for me, anyway. Okay.
Well, I'm just going to say to him, okay, Lord, to the best of my ability, I surrender. And if I'm not, I know you're going to show me where I haven't, and we'll work this all out.
Yeah, that's all good. Yeah. Definitely good. All right. I'm going to leave it there. So go back.